The movie opens with a newlywed couple, B and Paul. After their wedding, marked by cans clattering behind their car, they share their story on camera. B, now a wife, introduces herself first, followed by Paul, who recalls their first date at an Indian restaurant. An unfortunate reaction to the food led to an unexpected night at B's place, culminating in a marriage proposal. Despite the initial hiccup with Indian food, they triumphed over it. B reveals they celebrated their wedding with a cinnamon roll instead of a traditional cake, expressing her joy at having a partner. The couple then arrives at a secluded woodland cottage, their new home, where B begins a tour. B guides Paul through her childhood home, a cottage, showcasing rooms including the bear room, named for its bear hide decor. Paul recalls a near-drowning incident in the bathroom. Despite B's nighttime fears, Paul reassures her that the inside is no different. B reveals her childhood habit of hiding items in hollow fake ducks. As they sleep, an unexplained light slowly passes over them. The next morning, B teases Paul with a duck containing a joke note she wrote as a child. While making pancakes, B broaches the topic of having a baby, but both are unsure and agree to take their time to decide. Paul suggests they focus on their honeymoon. He's intrigued by a bear hiding in the cottage, which B reveals was hunted by her father. This leads to a discussion about hunting, with Paul admitting he's only used traps. They head to a boathouse to get swimwear before enjoying a boat ride on the lake. B, a former Girl Scout, decides to swim and begins undressing. Paul encourages her to fully embrace the solitude of their location. Encouraged by Paul, B attempts to swim but finds the water too cold. Their swimming plans are thwarted, leading to playful antics and a shared shower at home. Later, they come across a named restaurant, where B humorously suggests their specialty must be food. The restaurant is deserted, and a strange man informs them it's closed. His abrupt anger prompts them to leave. As they depart, the man recognizes B, addressing her as Trixie, and introduces himself as Will. B, surprised, greets Will warmly, and they share a few words in French. Will reveals the restaurant is his wife's family business and apologizes for his earlier rudeness. B tells Paul about Will's past as a notable hockey player, which Will insists is still ongoing. Annie, Will's wife, abruptly asks them to leave, leading to a tense moment as Will restrains her. He explains that Annie is unwell and offers to bring them food, seemingly more interested in catering to B. Pleased by B's smile, Will leaves them. Later at home, B contemplates something in bed, but dismisses it as nothing when asked. Paul suggests she was thinking about her ex-lover, Will, who B clarifies was a childhood summer friend. Paul teases B by calling her Trixie, Will's nickname for her. B refers to Annie as that woman, expressing her unease about Annie's behavior. Paul attributes Annie's odd behavior to being with Will, whom he perceives as unstable due to his violent outburst and rough handling of Annie. When B suggests that Annie might be at fault, Paul interprets it as B defending Will. Paul asserts that they are different from the couple they encountered, and B concurs. That night, amidst flickering lights, Paul's alarm triggers prematurely, prompting him to gather his fishing gear. He steps outside, accidentally dropping his worm box, but doesn't retrieve the scattered worms. Noticing the early hour and the reset digital clock, he returns inside to find B missing from their bed and the house. The open kitchen door leads him outside, where he anxiously calls for B, frustrated that their honeymoon has turned into a solitary search in the dark woods. A distant sound catches his attention, leading him to investigate. Paul stumbles upon a naked figure in the woods, who he believes is B. Startled by his touch, she screams. He carries her back to the cottage where she dons his shirt. Confused and concerned, Paul questions her about the incident, but B can only respond with uncertainty. She apologizes, suggesting she might have been sleepwalking. Reluctantly, Paul accepts this explanation. The next morning, he finds B in the kitchen, making breakfast, not sleepwalking as he initially feared. He lightens the mood with a zombie joke, but becomes concerned when B forgets to butter the bread and describes feeling odd. Paul notes that in all their time together, she has never sleepwalked before. Paul notes that B, who never forgets how to make French toast, seems seems off when she messes up the coffee, and it turns out to be just water. He's left confused by her behavior, but chooses not to address it. Later, while boating, Paul catches a frog and jokes about it being their dinner, expecting B to laugh as she used to play with frogs as a child. Instead, she remains serious. They engage in a playful water fight before B suddenly suggests they swim and leap into the water, catching Paul off guard. Back at their home, Paul questions B's decision to jump into the cold water, to which she responds it was meant to be humorous. He expresses concern about her unusual behavior, and B attributes it to fatigue from recent events like their wedding. Paul's only desire is to ensure her happiness. However, he notices peculiar marks on her legs during an intimate moment, which B dismisses as mosquito bites. Despite his doubts, given his familiarity with such bites, he wonders if she was bitten during her sleepwalking episode. B insists they are mosquito bites, and wishing to end the discussion, decides to nap. While she sleeps, Paul re-examines the marks and uses the opportunity to revisit the spot where he found her sleepwalking. There, he discovers her torn nightgown, stained with an unidentifiable fluid. Paul discovers oversized footprints near their home, adding to the mystery. At home, he overhears B rehearsing a conversation about in front of a mirror, presumably for him. She doesn't encounter him as expected when she leaves the room. Later, they enjoy a fireside marshmallow roast, during which Paul observes B thoughtfully. Back home, they share a kiss, during which B complains of her headache, despite taking Tylenol. Recognizing her rehearsed lines, Paul questions if she's avoiding intimacy, surprising her. He emphasizes the importance of open communication in their marriage, but his attempts to uncover the truth are unsuccessful. He expresses his feelings about her growing distant. Paul suggests Bea put on her nightgown, but she claims it's in the laundry. As they settle in bed, Paul stays awake and observes B leave the room, only to return quickly, explaining she went for a drink. When he questions the absence of a glass, she remains silent. Later, a mysterious light illuminates their room, leaving Paul puzzled. He peers out the window, sees nothing, and decides to venture outside with a shotgun. On hearing a noise, he fires a warning shot. Paul's gunshot wakes B, who he finds standing behind him. They return home where B cautions him about venturing into the woods. Paul insists someone was outside and mentions the strange light. He then reveals his earlier discovery of her torn nightgown and the oversized footprints in the woods. B maintains she was sleepwalking. Despite their disagreement, Paul reassures her of his love, but urges her to communicate openly. He questions if she met Will, which agitates B. She denies it vehemently, accusing Paul of misunderstanding the situation. She insists it wasn't Will and accuses Paul of spoiling their time together. In a later scene, both B and Paul are awake in their room, with Paul restlessly toggling his flashlight. B appears troubled. The next morning, B oddly writes down her and Paul's names in a notebook, quickly hiding it when Paul approaches. Later, Paul begins cooking, responding curtly to B's inquiry about his activity. Outside, a frustrated Paul pokes at burnt firewood and flicks ants off the ground. He notices B's leg marks have worsened and remains skeptical about them being mosquito bites. While fishing, Paul unexpectedly expresses a desire to return to the city, leaving B surprised as they're on their honeymoon. B tries to defuse the tension, expressing her desire for unity and intimacy. However, their moment is disrupted when Paul discovers blood on his hand. Despite Bea's reassurances, Paul insists the bleeding is abnormal and they need medical help. He rejects Bea's explanation of menstruation, having kept track of her cycle to avoid it during their honeymoon. Overwhelmed by the recent events, Paul insists they leave and threatens to seek answers elsewhere if B doesn't disclose what happened. Then it turns out Paul attempts to enter the closed restaurant. He encounters Annie at the dock and starts a conversation. Annie suddenly collapses and behaves oddly, introducing herself and her husband Will, echoing B's earlier notepad entries. When Paul inquires about Will, Annie reveals he's hiding. Paul notices similar marks on Annie as on B and questions their origin and if Will is responsible. Annie cryptically warns Paul to keep his distance or risk getting hurt. Paul is left bewildered by Annie's warning. After she departs, he spots a blood-stained hat in the water. He finds an open door on the other side of the restaurant and ventures inside. Despite noticing a surveillance camera, the room is dark and deserted. At a computer displaying Will and Annie as the wallpaper, he accesses security footage showing Annie walking outside at night under a mysterious light. The monitor suddenly shuts off and the lights flicker. Paul discovers walls covered in notes, one of which contains contains erratic writings similar to B's. Paul finds a note with the same mysterious substance that was on B's nightgown. As he leaves, a shadowy figure is seen behind a window. Back home, he examines B's notebook. Finding its contents perplexing, he repeatedly asks B to identify herself, and after an unsettling pause, she finally says his name. B begins to recite basic personal information, prompting Paul to question why she's writing such fundamental details down. B herself is unsure of her actions. Adding to Paul's confusion, Paul is also curious about the source of the mysterious light. He rules out Will as a suspect after finding his bloodied hat and suspects Annie's involvement. Paul fears that B might harm him in the same way he believes Annie harmed Will. B quickly assures him that she wants to protect him, leaving Paul stunned. In his bewilderment, he frantically searches for the car keys, but to no avail. Meanwhile, B is in the bathroom, seemingly inserting something into herself. Paul, unable to open the locked door, forces his way in to find B surrounded by blood. She urgently instructs him to go back to the bedroom. Confused and demanding answers, Paul finds B unresponsive and seemingly disoriented. He affectionately calls her Honeybee and asks for her usual buzzing response. Instead, she cryptically replies, "We don't remember," referring to herself in the plural. As B attempts to flee, Paul restrains her and brings her back to the bed. In his confusion, Paul ties B to the bed, expressing that his wife wouldn't behave this way. He notices a slimy substance on her head and yearns for the return of his wife as B struggles to free herself. Once calm, she insists she is his wife. Seeking confirmation, Paul quizzes her about their first date and his marriage proposal, but her responses are incorrect or forgotten. Distraught, Paul questions what happened to her. Paul removes a thick, slimy substance from B, who then pleads for his help to extract something from her body. He pulls out a strange, over 2-foot-long cord-like object, leaving him teary and confused. B, unable to explain, later admits to a disturbing encounter in the woods involving light and shadowy figures that entered her body. Although they didn't stay, she could still sense their presence, gaining knowledge of their intentions and directives. Paul is bewildered by B's actions and her inability to explain them. Despite her physical presence, she seems to be fading away. Paul insists they need to leave, but B resists. A mysterious light shines on B, prompting her to declare that they don't need Paul and hint at her affiliation with a group. She suggests Paul is running out of time and needs to be hidden. After knocking him unconscious, Paul wakes up restrained on their boat. B claims she's saving him by planning to submerge him in the lake, assuring him he'll be safe from unknown entities. Despite Paul's protests, B dismisses his concerns and throws him into the water. Later, B watches their wedding video, her appearance now grotesque. A returning light prompts her to meet Annie, who is similarly transformed. At the door, they join shadowy figures outside, their identities and intentions unknown. The recording ends with B's voice, stating she's no longer alone. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.